Welcome to Promo Insiders, an ASI media podcast that covers the topics that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm CJ Mitica, editor-in-chief of ASI Media, and today we're discussing ASI's 2022 ad impression study. I'm joined by Nate Kuzma, ASI's research director, to take a sneak peek at our highly anticipated report and reveal some key findings, including which promo products are the most influential among. Nate, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Always happy to.
Always happy to, he says with just a hint of sarcasm. So, Nate, so we can agree unequivocally that February is the worst month, and we could spend the whole podcast talking about it. Maybe he agrees, maybe he doesn't.
No, I agree. I post regularly on Twitter. February is by far the worst month of the year.
Yeah,
and after Sunday, it locks itself in as the worst month of the year because there's nothing.
Yes.
Nothing to do.
Yes. So they pushed the Super Bowl back 1 week, so that's the only silver lining. What used to be our only silver lining in February, but we have something better. The release of the ASI ad impression study actually releases tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Find it on, it'll be all over our website, but the specific URL will be asicentral.com/study. And we're here today to give a sneak peek of the ad impressions, talk about it, what it is, and go over some key findings of it, and give our readers and viewers and listeners a first look at it. So, Nate, this study is highly anticipated among our members, mm-hmm. But there are some people who might not know about or know what it is. So can you tell people what is the ad impression study and how can they use it for their
business? Sure. So the ad impression study has been around for a while now. It's been around for over a decade in various forms, right? But the purpose of the study initially was to put together a benchmark of promotional products vis-a-vis other advertising medium to show how effective some may be or wouldn't be, right? So that's the first thing. I'm getting feedback, by the way, just so we're clear on this a little bit on my end. So
it sounds only a little bit. I think we're fine for you to keep going.
So that's the purpose of it. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to show how valuable promotional products were relative to other types of advertising that consumers could choose from, whether it was magazine advertising, newspaper advertising, digital advertising such as Google or Facebook. We were trying to do that. And what we've shown over the course of the study, and I've been running the study since 2014, is that the overall power of promotional products amongst consumers is second to none. It has the best cost per impression. It has by far the highest recall across all advertising medium, which is in excess of 80%. When you give a promotional product to somebody. And it also has, and what we're really talking about in terms of this year's, in terms of the 22 study on a state-by-state basis, was which types of promotional products have the greatest effect on a consumer's willingness to do business with the advertiser that gave them that product. And, that's really what we're looking for here. When you look about, advertising can be used for various different things, but the main thing that it's going to be used for ultimately is, will they do more business with me?
Right.
That's what we measured. And we measured it across all 50 states this year. And what we were trying to determine was within all 50 states, what are the top products that advertisers and distributors, obviously as well, should be pushing to their clients to give away to consumers to really impact their overall perceptions. And, the great thing is there really are differences by state, right? Is there a national average? For sure, right? But are there differences by state? In some states, are you going to give away drinkware? In some states, are you going to give away performance wear? Some states, are you going to give away pens, right? The almighty pen in our world, right? But yeah, the answer is yes. And it's it's broken down by state. And we surveyed a little bit over 40,000 people this year as part of this study using the Google Consumer Surveys tool. So this is a wide variety of the population that we surveyed. Over the course of the study, and we have other data that is available and will be available on the market research page, which we're currently doing to make this data as accessible as possible. We've surveyed well over 1/3 people over the last 10 years for this research. So it's a really, really big effort that we take very seriously.
So just a reminder for our viewers and listeners, since we're doing this on Facebook Live, if you got a question or comment, feel free to post it. Again, we'll be getting some of the data later, which you may have questions about. We're not showing the whole thing. We're just going to show a few key insights. But again, if you have a comment or question, you want to post it, we'll be happy to talk about it. So Nate, so we're looking at these promotional products and what's effective for the consumer to do business. How can people use that? So just talking about generally, how can distributors and suppliers use that information to help them when they're making decisions for their business?
Sure. I mean, the first point is to target your advertising and target your messaging, right? When you're going in there, let's start off with the distributors first, right? If I'm a distributor and I'm going to meet with a client, I can say, well, I recommend these 3 products, or I recommend these, pick the best out of these 3 products or these 6 products, right? It's pretty basic, right? But all you have really that you're giving in there is your opinion, right? You can have your opinion about what's worked in the past. That's valuable. But now you're actually bringing in an outside resource, an outside thing where you can say, listen, here's what I recommend, and here's why I recommend it. And all of a sudden, that'll, perk your client's ears up a little bit, especially if you all of a sudden, let's say you're doing a cross-state promotion, right? Like I live right on the border, literally 3 miles away from Pennsylvania. And depending on where you are, there's going to be different products that you may want to push, depending on if you're doing stuff down in Philly or stuff in, North Jersey or stuff in New York. It's going to be different. And we actually, in past years, we've actually looked at differences even by urban, rural, and suburban consumers as well. So you would go in there with these data, and the graphics that we have nowadays are readily available that you can just download them individually. You can copy them into a PowerPoint. You can post them on social, but you can actually say, here's what I'm recommending. Here's why I'm recommending it. It's funny. The perception, I think, is always that it's going to be the most expensive product, right? It's always going to be outerwear. It's always going to be the $40, performance polo. Sometimes, right? For the first product. But then what you see is there's often a big, gradation from the top product down to the 5th product. And we measured 13 different products. So there's a lot, so when we show top 5, it's not like we only did 5. We didn't do first to worst. When you're looking at the top 5 products, those are the top 5, and they're the top 5 amongst 13. So you're making a very, very strong recommendation about why that is.
Yeah, when we dive into some of the data later, you'll see some of that in action. And I do like the fact that it's not just the most expensive products. But you bring that up, Nate. I think we want to touch on something just to make it clear. So we have the ad impression study, which measures the most influential promo products. We also have our monthly ESP data, and we've been also doing quarterly ESP data that tracks which products get the most searches in ESP. So what's the difference between what the ad impression study is measuring versus what the ESP data is showing?
Well, the first, they're 2 different data sources, right? I mean, let's just throw that out there. They are literally 2 different data sources. So the ad impressions is only amongst consumers, right? And that's the first thing you remember. The second one is amongst distributors. And very often what you see is that distributors are looking sometimes very much point in time.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, give an example here. One of the products that we always see rise up in terms of importance in the late summer, early fall is Halloween items, just as an example, right? You're not going to have Halloween items come up. We didn't measure that. It's a very different study. Another thing you might have, though, is like pens. Let's use that as a specific example. Pens is often the most searched for item in ESP, especially now that we're sort of post-main pandemic phase, right? Talking about masks and everything else that went along with that. But the thing is, when people are searching for pens, and it is often a very, very high search term, it's very specific search term, right? That's what people are putting in. It's just general. They just put in pens. They don't put in a lot of like differentiation. So that is the leading search term is going to be pushed up to the top. But in terms of like things like drinkware, which is also a top item, there's a lot of different variation for what people are searching for in terms of drinkware. They may be searching for aluminum water bottles. They may be searching for plastic water bottles. They may be searching for the Yeti drinkware. So they may be searching for a lot of different things. And that's why you kind of see that little bit of a really a disconnect. It's just a different data source.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think it's also important to note the difference between what's most in demand and what's most influential. And I guess it's an analogy that I would draw. If I wanted to get a small gift for my wife, I might buy her flowers, right? Just run to the store and get her flowers. Nothing super expensive. I'll spend $10-12 and get her a nice bouquet of flowers. But if it's for her birthday and I want to really really impress her, I'll get a diamond necklace, right? Something expensive, something that really really wows her. And so you think about the differences that way. If you take writing instruments, which are the most at the top of our research for many months now, it's very rare that you see a pen and be floored by it, but that's a popular product that people need on a regular basis, and that's why searches for them are so high. Compared to something like outerwear, where it's a more expensive item, and you don't get it as often, but when you do get it, it's something very impressive and very has a high perceived value and long lasting. So it really leaves an impression. But not everybody's going to buy outerwear because it's expensive. A lot of buyers don't.
And you have to find it in stock right now. Let's be clear about that.
So I think that it's a key thing to remember when we're putting out all these different, all these different lists and data. What are we measuring for? They innately show the effectiveness of a product in different ways, but it's more in terms of in the ad impression study, what's influencing a buyer versus ESP data, what are distributors searching for, because those are the things they're pushing to their clients.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be a party. It's certainly not a data party without some PowerPoints. So we do have some charts here. I apologize. I wish this was bigger, but the Facebook powers that be would had to group us into vertical windows to show this. But no big deal. We're going to go over some of this data, and these charts aren't super detailed anyway. So we're going to start with the very first one, and this is the most influential products in the United States, the 5 most influential products. I'll read them off here, so for our audio listeners, so they can get a sense. Number 1, outerwear. 2, performance wear. 3, masks. 4, health and safety. 5, polos. So Nate, what can we learn from this?
It's apparel heavy, right? For sure, right? Like it's apparel. Apparel makes up, give or take, about 40% of the overall promotional products industry, right? And it's while it's obviously variation between all different types of apparel, and I know that our distributors out there and the suppliers out there can go into great detail about all of the different variations. The reality is there's a lot more hard good when you actually start looking at all the different hard goods out there. Like compared, when you look at ESP, how many hard goods are on ESP? It's massive compared to the amount of apparel. But in terms of what consumers are actually really resonates with them, it is apparel products. And it's in the past we've seen T-shirts kind of hop up there as well. And in some of the states, you'll also see T-shirts as the number 1 or 2 item as well. And that's what you kind of see. But let's be clear. Like in consumers' minds, they have an implicit value that they put with any product that they get. Sometimes it's going to be performance wear. Sometimes it's going to be outerwear. Sometimes it's going to be all of those. So that's what they're kind of putting in their minds as saying, okay, well, if I get a fleece, right, or I get a rain jacket, it has a higher perceived value to them because they actually might not have an idea what it costs, right, or at least a perception of what it costs.
Yes,
that's kind of where you get to here. It's not that they don't value the other products. I mean, let's be clear. Masks was shocking that was number 3, but it was. Now, is that going to, but you want to talk about a product that's going to be differentiated greatly by the state that you live in? That's one of them, right? And but it's also using a little bit of common sense here. Obviously, if all of a sudden mask mandates go away next week, which God, I hope they would one day. You would see the overall value of those to the consumer decrease. And this data was collected throughout 2021. So this is not just a point in time. This was collected over about a 10-month period.
Yeah.
So it, and we do that basically so that we're not just dealing with, because if we would have done this all, in a 1 month period, God knows it could have been skewed greatly. You would have had mass number one and everything else 4, 5, and 6, right? So that's sort of what you see. But that's just a way to use the data. It's to think about how, where you're selling your products, because it's not a one size fits all proposition very often.
All right, let's move on to the next slide here. So we did it on a geographic basis, but we also did some demographic segmenting. We did it by age group, and we also did it by gender. So this is an interesting side by side. These are the 5 most influential promo products among men and among women. So men, outerwear, performance wear, polos, masks, and writing instruments. Women, outerwear, health and safety, performance wear, bags, masks. So out of the 5 for each group, there's 3 that are shared here. I think people, well, if they're doing something that's gender targeted, will want to go very, very niche and try to differentiate, right? Something that will just appeal to women and just appeal to men. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be products in those shared categories that don't have that different appeal, but to me, what jumped out to me is that there's a lot of shared universal appeal across both genders when it comes to these products.
No, sure, there is, right? But and there's going to be, everybody's a consumer, right? Everybody likes what they like. But I do think that there's differences here, and one thing that I was surprised with was that writing instruments pop so high for men. We haven't really, we've done this. We did this study with this exact format. I want to say about 5 years ago, and there's been some changes in overall perceptions of promotional products in different types. So to see pens pop up that high was a little bit surprising for men. Yeah. For women, big increase into health and safety products. That never used to be nearly as big as it was. Obviously, there's a lot that's changed since 2016 when we last did this. So that's one of the things. Bags, though, is one thing that's been very consistent. The overall value and perceived influence on purchasing behavior of promotional bags amongst women has always been greater than men, and it holds true now.
Yeah, and look, it makes sense. Like if you want to set aside the stereotype that only women do the shopping, which we know is not true. There's just the fact that in everyday life, when women tend to carry bags more. Like I used to carry a work bag every day, but working from home, I don't do that. That's the only situation where I would have a bag on me was for work. And I think for women, it's just a bigger part of their everyday lifestyle versus men, so that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I would caution our members and our viewers that, again, just because outerwear is number one for both men and women, and they share performance wear, do your research, do your due diligence. That doesn't mean that they're going to wear the same jacket, the same shirt. Find out the styles for your audience, who you're selling it to, and even among men, we know groups of men, group of women, they're not the same based on age, based on audience, where they work. Those are all questions that you need to dig into to find the specific that's best for your potential end user.
Yeah, and obviously, this is also dependent very much on what is the purpose of it? What are you doing with it, right? If you're giving away products to if you're working with a client who wants to give away products that would be valued by their employees, right? Mm-hmm. I would say outerwear is pretty key for that. You know what I'm saying? You're probably dealing with, as long as you're not dealing with a 50,000 person company, right? But if you are, good work. Mm-hmm. But if you're not, and you're dealing with 1,000 people, 500 people, 300 people, then all of a sudden giving away outerwear to the employees so that they can feel a part of your brand more so, and then advertise your brand as it goes through. That's probably a good way to look at it, and that's something that you could probably pitch to your clients. If you're going to CES, right, and you're going to have 10,000 people visiting your booth, maybe not, right? Maybe unless you're going to do it in 24 and you place your order today, maybe not. Maybe that's where you're going to look at some of the other items. And depending on what, and like for trade shows, they're going to have, if you talk to the trade show organizers, they'll have a general breakup of what is the overall demographic breakdown. So that's where you would want to dig into this data a little bit more and really tailor your offerings. To make, obviously you want to do what's most effective, but you also want to do what makes the most financial sense from an ROI perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, let's move on to our next slide. So Nate mentioned in the beginning, we broke this out for states and for regions. So that overall U.S. information is interesting, but I think where you really want to drill down deeper for your state. And just as an example, we have the 5 most influential promo products for consumers in the Southeast. Number 1 is outerwear, 2, performance wear, 3, health and safety, 4, masks, and 5 is a tie between T-shirts and polo shirts. The thing that's interesting to me, Nate, is that people are going to look at this and say, how can outerwear be number 1? Like it's warm in the South and no one wears jackets, but obviously that's not true.
Well, it's not. I mean, never mind. It's still a perceived value, right? And people wear, and unless you're down in the Keys, right, or really South Florida, you own some outerwear. But
totally.
I remember when we did this study a couple of years, the first time we did this, and outerwear popped up as the number 1 most popular item. I believe it was in Arizona, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Arizona, but because let's be honest here. What happens? Well, in some of these places, it might not get bone-crushing cold where it hurts your face like it does in the Northeast, right? But it still gets cold, and people may not have that much, and they still value it. If it's a high-quality, well-made product, people know it. And there's been a few types of categories, promotional products categories, where you've had a lot of movement over the last several years in terms of higher end brands and higher quality products coming in. And for sure, that has been in the outerwear category, right? It absolutely has been. And, it goes to show when you actually look at this as well, when you see T-shirts all of a sudden, by far the biggest category of promotional products that we've had for the better part of the last decade at least, right? That's the number 1 promotional product. And, we could probably come up with some calculation that says there's 10 billion T-shirts wandering around America at any given time, right? Still, to see that in the top 5, and that's a much lower cost item than would be performance wear or outerwear. That goes to show you how, the staying power of that and how important that is. So that's kind of what I would say. So even though it may not logically seem like, you think of the South, you think of outerwear, well, the Southeast region is pretty damn big.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it's true. We're talking about big regions. And remember, these product categories are very broad. So outerwear is not just, heavy duty, $100, $200 winter jackets. There's a whole range of fleece and lightweight, lightweight outerwear options. Sure. And those things are in demand almost, maybe like 9-10 months out of the year for a lot of states. It doesn't mean you have to be in the dead of winter and up in New England. And so, I think this is valuable information because obviously which products are influential, but again, what are they using for? Figure out if your client has an outerwear need, and then you can present different options based on those needs. And so again, we have this for regions, and we have this for states. So you'll be able to find all that in the report. Let's go to the last slide we have here. So not only do we identify the most influential promo products by those states and regions, but we also then looked at the products and said, where are they most influential, right? Where do they have the greatest effect? And these are just 2 examples here. One, I think that's sort of it to be expected. One that's a little bit of a surprise. Performance wear is most influential in the Southwest. And then for masks, they're most influential in the mountain region. Now, the performance wear, that makes sense to me. Hot climate, outdoor activity, totally makes sense. The mask was a shock to me because you think about states in that region that aren't that aren't very not first of all not very liberal, right? At least in certain states, and doesn't seem like havens for mask wearing yet. Masks were shown to be the most influential in those states.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, sure. Quickly, touching on the Southwest really fast, right? It's it's active. It's often warm. You need some sort of like wicking material if you're outside, 9 months, 8 months out of the year. So that kind of makes sense. I think we can all kind of agree, like look at that and say, okay, compared to other regions, that makes a little bit of sense. You're not wearing, we're not big performance wear people up in the Northeast for 6 months out of the year because we don't want moisture whipped away. Let's be clear. We want to be warm. So looking at the mountain region, I agree. It was a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a disconnect from what I would have anticipated. But then you actually start thinking about, and you think about what are the states that are in that region, right? And keeping in mind that there's going to be some states, and we do attempt to weight this data by overall population as well, right? So there's going to be, when you look at the mountain region, let's look at the states that are actually there. A lot of those states there may not exactly have the largest, I guess you could say, populations. Mm-hmm. Right? But the ones that do, such as like Colorado, which has a very, very large population, and to your point about being maybe not the most mask-wearing friendly states or liberal states out there, Colorado kind of fits that bill in many cases. So that, and then when you look at some of the other states where you have more densely populated like cities, right? Like look at like Idaho and such like that, where you do start to see, some younger populations in there and some, some tech influences and some.
There's some fast-growing cities in that region. You've heard of these new Silicon Valleys that are popping up in these cities that you've mentioned. There is a younger skewing movement that's infiltrating those states.
I like the word infiltrating. It's like we're on YouTube. And when we're talking about the new energy moving into the Yellowstone area. So yeah, but that's kind of what it is. So it's not, listen, we can go look, and there's other slides that sort of talk about like what are the top 5, promotional products in the mountain region, right? And they're going to be, they're going to be those. That's one slide to certainly line. This is more what I would consider just very interesting. Right, when you look at overall where do masks stay in it, it's more just like it gives you food for thought. And what I really think that this research can do, and what a lot of research can do, if you actually take the time to actually think it through, not everything may make sense, right? Initially, it might be counter to what you actually believe in, or what your thoughts would be. But it gives you a chance to kind of reset and think about, okay, why would this be? And that's, I think, important too, because it kind of resets your mind and realize that just because you feel one certain way doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a good message. Like we live in a time of information overload. We have all this data that's available to us. Look, our job, ASI, your job, Nate, is to analyze that data and present it to our members in a way that's actionable and makes sense to them. But I think what's been proven, especially in these last couple of years, is that you need to think critically, right? Like, so when you're being presented this information, ask yourself, does it make sense? Why is it that way? How can I use it? And and don't take things just as gospel. I know we've done our due diligence on our end to present these facts and done all the hard work. But I encourage our viewers and listeners, take that extra step, think about what's going into this data, and then how can you use it for your best advantage.
Yeah, and honestly, I welcome conversation, right? I do. Like I learned long ago when I do research to not go in and think about what I think is going to be happening. I actually don't. I try not to. I try to just go in and see what the data says. Yeah, and that's the best way that I can kind of present the data in a completely unbiased way. With I look at my findings. I look at where the data lead, and sometimes it leads in unexpected areas. In some of this, I would say some of it is expected, some of it's not. And feel free to reach out to me directly. Like I'm my information is readily available pretty much everywhere. I'm always happy to discuss. I'm always happy to just talk about difference in perceptions and what are people seeing, because that's another form of research as well. So definitely take a read through this, think about it critically, and then use it. Use it to sell to your clients. Use it to differentiate your business, and God willing, one day we'll get to a point where we don't see mass in the top 5 anymore.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So as a reminder, so the ad impression study is releasing tomorrow. It'll be available at asicentral.com/study. And I didn't say this before, it's free. You do have to sign up, but the study is free, and then you're welcome to use the data as you see fit. In fact, when you get that report, all the individual piece of information, there'll be downloadable slides that then you can then use individually to present to clients or spread internally. So it's very, very friendly that way. And one of the things that I want to mention is that, and one of the things I like about the ad impression study is that it's not the same thing year after year. Is that Nate very consciously switches up the format. So definitely look at past year studies. Obviously that data is older, and certainly there's been changes in the last 2 years, but some of the core fundamental findings are definitely the same. I think you would agree with that.
Absolutely. Definitely take a look. Like, we don't want to do the same study year after year. That would turn into a tracking study, and most researchers would agree with me that they hate tracking studies, right? Nothing changes. That's the problem with it. So definitely take a look at it. There's different data. There's data from last year in terms of like number of impressions, and there's number of impressions. What's a lot of detail about male, female. Those data in many different countries around the world that we've had in the past year. So definitely take a read through it. If you have any questions, reach out to us.
Yep. And so asicentral.com/research is where you can find all our research that Nate does, all our amazing research. Nate, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Siege.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching, listening. Have a great day.